Your mind feels like a crowded room. Notifications ping, thoughts race, and no matter how much you try, it's hard to catch your breath. Life moves faster every day, leaving you restless and overwhelmed. But what if you could quiet the noise and feel peaceful inside? That's where the busy Buddha comes in. Together, we'll explore how stillness can transform your life, bringing calm to your mind and clarity to your choices. It's not about doing more, it's about finding the power in doing less. This audiobook is your guide to mastering the art of silence in a noisy world. Chapter 1. The Noise We Carry. It was another frantic morning in the city. Cars honked, people rushed past, and phones buzzed in a never-ending stream of alerts. In the middle of this chaos sat a tiny figure, busy Buddha. Unbothered by the whirlwind around him, he radiated a calm that seemed almost magical.
"Why do you look so peaceful?"
A passerby asked, pausing for a moment in the rush. The Buddha smiled.
"Because I do not carry the noise."
He replied gently.
"We all carry noise, though, don't we? Not just the sounds of the world, but the chatter in our own minds. I'm not good enough. What's next on my to-do list? Why did I say that yesterday?" These thoughts swirl endlessly, weighing us down.
The little Buddha continued.
The noise comes from everywhere. The world is loud, but the loudest sound is often your own thoughts. To find peace, you must first notice this noise. Think about it. When was the last time you sat quietly and just breathed? Most of us fill every moment with something: music, scrolling, planning. Silence feels uncomfortable because it makes us face what's really inside.
Busy Buddha taught the passerby his first lesson.
Sit for a moment and close your eyes,
He said.
Listen to the world around you, then listen to yourself. Notice the noise, but don't hold on to it. Let it drift away like leaves on a stream.
At first, the passerby struggled. The noise seemed louder when he tried to ignore it, but with practice, he started to notice small gaps, the moments between thoughts. Those gaps grew longer, like tiny pockets of peace.
Do this every day,
The Buddha said.
You'll begin to understand the difference between hearing noise and carrying it.
In the coming chapters, Busy Buddha will guide us deeper into this journey. But for now, reflect on this. The first step to stillness is simply noticing the noise. It's not about silencing it overnight. It's about no longer letting it control you. Peace starts when you put down the weight of what you cannot control. Chapter 2. The Gift of Silence. The city park was alive with activity. Children laughed as they chased each other, dogs barked, and a food truck blared cheerful music. Sitting quietly on a bench under the shade of an old tree was the little busy Buddha. His eyes were closed, his face serene, as if the noise around him didn't exist. A jogger slowed down, curious.
How can you sit so peacefully with all this going on?
He asked, wiping sweat from his brow. The Buddha opened his eyes and smiled.
Because silence isn't something you find outside. It's something you carry within.
Many people think silence is rare, even impossible. They imagine a quiet mountaintop or an empty room. But the Buddha explained that silence isn't about the absence of sound. It's about creating a calm space inside yourself, no matter where you are. He invited the jogger to sit beside him.
Close your eyes,
He said softly.
Don't try to stop the sounds. Let them pass through you like the wind through trees.
At first, the jogger felt overwhelmed. Every sound seemed louder. The chatter of the kids, the bark of a dog, even the rustle of leaves, it all felt like too much. But the Buddha guided him.
Notice each sound and then let it drift away. Silence isn't the end of noise. It's the space that holds it all.
Gradually, the jogger began to sense something new. Between the barking and the laughter, there was a quiet rhythm, a pause. It was subtle, but real. like the space between heartbeats. The Buddha explained,
This is the gift of silence. It's not about shutting the world out. It's about opening yourself to its beauty without being swept away.
When the jogger opened his eyes, he felt lighter, more connected to the moment. The park hadn't changed, but his experience of it had.
Practice this.
The Buddha said,
Each day, give yourself the gift of a quiet moment. The more you discover silence inside, the more peace you'll find everywhere.
The jogger jogged away, but he carried something new with him, a small glowing piece of silence. Chapter 3. The Mind's Nature. A storm or a lake. The town square buzzed with life. Shoppers darted from store to store. A street performer played lively tunes, and pigeons flapped noisily near a cafe. Amid this whirlwind of activity, busy Buddha sat quietly on the edge of a fountain. His reflection shimmered in the still water below, untouched by the chaos around him. A hurried businesswoman paused nearby, glancing at the Buddha.
How can you stay so calm with all this noise and rushing?
She asked, dropping her heavy bag beside her. The Buddha smiled and pointed to the fountain.
Look at the water.
He said,
When it's calm, it reflects everything clearly. But if I were to stir it,
He dipped a tiny hand into the water, creating ripples.
the reflection becomes distorted. Our minds are just like this.
He continued,
When they're calm, we see life clearly. But when disturbed, everything feels chaotic and unclear.
The woman frowned.
But life is messy. How can anyone keep their mind still?
By understanding its nature.
The Buddha replied,
A storm may pass over a lake, but the lake remains. It doesn't try to stop the wind or the rain. It simply lets them come and go.
He invited her to sit by the fountain.
Close your eyes for a moment.
He said,
Imagine your mind as a lake. Thoughts and worries are the wind and waves. Let them pass without fighting them.
At first, she found it hard. Her thoughts felt loud and urgent, but the Buddha's words lingered in her mind.
Let them come and go.
Slowly, she began to notice gaps between the waves. The storm inside her started to settle. When she opened her eyes, the square felt different, quieter, more manageable.
It's not about controlling the storm.
The Buddha said gently.
It's about knowing that you are the lake, not the waves.
The woman smiled for the first time that day.
I think I understand.
She said. As she walked away, she carried a new perspective, one she would revisit whenever life felt overwhelming. And the little Buddha? He sat peacefully by the fountain, waiting to guide the next seeker of calm. Chapter 4. Practical Silence. Building your stillness practice. The market buzzed with life. Vendors called out their prices. Children weaved through the crowd, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers and spices. On a small wooden bench near a colorful fruit stall sat the busy Buddha, his hands resting gently on his knees, his eyes closed in perfect stillness. A curious shopkeeper approached him, carrying a tray of oranges.
Buddha, how can you sit so peacefully here? This place is so loud.
The Buddha opened his eyes and smiled.
The world may be loud, but your mind doesn't have to be. Stillness begins with simple steps.
Steps?
The shopkeeper asked, setting the tray down.
Yes,
Said the Buddha.
let me show you.
He gestured for the shopkeeper to sit beside him.
First, focus on your breath. Feel it as it moves in and out of your nose. Let everything else fade into the background.
The shopkeeper tried. At first, the sounds of haggling and footsteps seemed impossible to ignore, but the Buddha guided him gently.
Don't fight the noise. Let it flow past you, like a river moving around a stone. Now,
He continued.
bring your attention to one thing. It could be the feel of your breath, the warmth of the sun, or even the sounds of the market. Let that be your anchor.
Slowly, the shopkeeper noticed something surprising. The noise felt less overwhelming. The chaos became part of the background, like music he didn't need to focus on. The Buddha smiled again.
This is how you practice silence in a noisy world. It's not about running away from sound. It's about finding calm within it.
But how do I do this every day?
The shopkeeper asked.
Start small.
The Buddha replied.
Set aside just 5 minutes to sit and breathe. You can do it here, at home, or even while waiting for something. Over time, the practice will grow, and so will your stillness.
The shopkeeper nodded, feeling lighter already. He returned to his stall, carrying a newfound sense of calm. And the Buddha? He remained on the bench, a quiet figure in the lively market, ready to share his wisdom with anyone who asked. Chapter 5. The Art of Letting Go. The playground was alive with sound. Children shouted joyfully as they ran, the squeak of swings mixed with the thud of a bouncing ball, and parents called out instructions from the sidelines. On one of the swings, the busy Buddha sat quietly, his small frame glowing softly. A frustrated father, struggling to calm his crying toddler, noticed the serene figure.
"How can you look so peaceful in all this chaos?"
he asked, his voice tinged with exhaustion. The Buddha turned to him with a kind smile.
Because I do not hold on to what I cannot control,
he said. The man frowned, bouncing his child on his hip.
"What do you mean?"
The Buddha gestured to the swing beside him.
Sit for a moment,
he said. The man hesitated, but curiosity got the better of him.
Imagine your mind is like this swing.
The Buddha began.
Every time you try to control things, you can't, like the noise here or your child's mood. You're holding the swing too tightly. You stop it from moving naturally, and it feels harder.
He gave the swing a gentle push, letting it sway freely.
But when you let go, the swing finds its own rhythm. Letting go isn't giving up. It's allowing life to move as it will, without resistance.
The father sighed.
That sounds easier said than done.
The Buddha chuckled softly.
It takes practice. Start small. When you feel frustration, take a breath and ask, is this something I can control? If the answer is no, imagine the swing. Let it go.
The father tried it, closing his eyes for a moment. He focused on his breath, imagining his frustrations as the swing moving on its own. When he opened his eyes, his shoulders had relaxed, and his child had stopped crying, curious about the glowing figure on the swing. The Buddha smiled again.
When you let go of what you can't control, you create space for peace to grow.
As the father walked away, his child giggling now, he felt lighter. Meanwhile, the Buddha sat quietly on the swing, waiting for the next person ready to learn the art of letting go. Chapter 6. Silence in Action. How Stillness Enhances Daily Life. The cafe bustled with activity. Baristas steamed milk, the sound of cups clinking filled the air, and customers chatted as they sipped their drinks. But at one small table near the window, a tiny figure sat perfectly still. Busy Buddha radiated calm, his glow soft but undeniable amidst the chaos. A young woman, juggling her phone, coffee, and a notebook, glanced at him curiously.
"How can you sit so calmly with all this going on?"
she asked, barely looking up from her phone. The Buddha smiled gently.
I'm not separate from the noise. I am here, and the noise is here. Stillness is about embracing both.
She furrowed her brow, still distracted.
But how does that help? I have so much to do. I'm always running around, multitasking.
The Buddha's smile deepened.
Multitasking creates a cluttered mind, but when you focus on the present moment, you create a clear space inside. In that space, you can move through tasks with ease without feeling overwhelmed.
He gestured to her notebook.
Take a moment. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. Let everything else fade for a second. In this silence, you can find clarity.
The woman hesitated but then took a deep breath, closing her eyes. At first, her thoughts rushed in, plans, deadlines, worries. But slowly, they started to soften, like ripples fading into calm water. After a few breaths, she opened her eyes, feeling lighter. The Buddha spoke softly.
When you practice silence, your actions become more purposeful. You do things with intention, not out of habit or stress. Even in the busiest moments, you'll notice a shift, a quiet strength inside that helps you move forward with ease.
She looked at him thoughtfully, the noise of the cafe no longer seeming so loud.
I see. It's about bringing calm into everything I do.
Exactly.
The Buddha nodded.
When you act with stillness, even the busiest days become peaceful.
She smiled, ready to face her day with newfound clarity, while the Buddha remained at his table, a quiet beacon in the storm of daily life. Chapter 7. A Journey Back to Yourself. The train station was alive with movement. Travelers hurried past, luggage wheels clattered on the tiled floor, and announcements echoed across the high ceiling. Yet right in the middle of the bustling scene, on a small patch of grass beneath a skylight, sat the busy Buddha. His eyes were closed, his expression serene, as sunlight bathed him in a soft glow. A teenager, earbuds in and backpack slung over one shoulder, stopped in his tracks when he noticed the little Buddha.
Hey,
He said, pulling out an earbud.
how are you so chill here? This place is insane.
The Buddha opened his eyes, his smile gentle.
Because I'm not trying to keep up with the rush. I've already arrived.
Arrived?
The teenager asked, confused.
But you're just sitting here.
The Buddha nodded.
That's the secret. Most people think they have to run to find peace, happiness, or meaning. But the truth is, everything you're looking for is already within you. When you stop running, you return to yourself.
The teenager frowned, still clutching his phone.
But how do you just stop? Life's always moving.
By pausing,
The Buddha said simply.
take a breath and feel it fill your body. Notice the ground beneath your feet. When you do this, even for a moment, you find yourself again.
The teenager hesitated, then dropped his backpack to the ground. He took a deep breath, just as the Buddha suggested. At first, his mind buzzed with distractions, texts, to-do lists, the train he needed to catch. But with each breath, he felt a little more grounded, like a weight lifting off his shoulders.
See?
The Buddha said with a twinkle in his eye.
When you come back to yourself, the rush outside doesn't matter so much. You're already where you need to be.
As the teenager opened his eyes, the station didn't feel so overwhelming anymore. The noise and movement were still there, but he felt steady, centered.
Thanks.
He said, smiling at the tiny figure.
I'll try to remember that.
The busy Buddha watched him go, his heart light. The station buzzed on, but within the Buddha's calm presence, a quiet reminder lingered. Peace isn't a destination. It's a journey back to yourself. Life is a symphony of sound, motion, and demands. Yet within it lies a quiet place, a stillness that is always with you. The busy Buddha has shown that peace isn't found in a perfect moment, but created in the now. By noticing the noise, embracing silence, and letting go, you discover that calm is not the absence of chaos, but your anchor in it. Each breath you take is a step back to yourself. Carry this wisdom forward. Let stillness guide your choices, actions, and thoughts. Because the true journey begins within.